Marcus Chen walked into the Royal Music Conservatory with nothing but a worn sheet music book and a year of practice on a free community center keyboard. The judges scoffed until he announced he would play Rachmaninoff's concerto. What happened? Next left the room in stunned silence. The polished oak doors swung shut behind Marcus with a final click. His sneakers made no sound on the marble floor, but 20 heads turned anyway. The other applicants sat in tailored suits with sheet music in leather folders. Their eyes traced the frayed cuffs of his sweater, the creased pages in his hands. A girl in a pearl gray dress whispered something to her neighbor. They laughed. The audition hall smelled of lemon cleaner and expensive perfume. His fingers tapped absent rhythms against his thigh, the same nervous habit he'd developed practicing on that half-broken community center keyboard. 32 keys were missing. The sustain pedal stuck. None of that mattered when Mr. Rodriguez stayed after hours to teach him, but now he saw how it looked to these people. A judge at the far end adjusted his glasses. Name an instrument? Marcus Chen. Piano. His voice didn't shake. Good. The judge's pen hovered over the form. Current instructor? Self-taught. Mostly. The whispers started then, soft as mice in the walls. He knew the statistics without needing to hear them. A study from the National Arts Foundation found students from top conservatory prep programs were 18 times more likely to pass elite auditions. The average age for starting private lessons among successful applicants was 4. Marcus had first touched a piano at 16. The summer the community center needed volunteers to wipe down the keys after children's choir practice. A boy with a violin case smirked. They let anyone try now? His friend fake coughed the word charity case. Marcus straightened his shoulders. The logo on the boy's blazer, Winthrop Academy, matched the brochure Elena had stared at for weeks before shaking her head at the tuition. The adjudicator cleared his throat. Repertoire? Rachmaninoff's Concerto No. 3. The room stilled. Violin bows stopped mid-polish. A water bottle capsized somewhere near the windows. Even the accompanist looked up from her score. Rachmaninoff's Third was the kind of piece that separated prodigies from professionals. The first movement alone demanded 6-octave arpeggios at breakneck speed, the left hand crossing the right 12 times in as many measures. Most conservatory graduates wouldn't attempt it without a decade of training. The head judge adjusted his collar. First movement only, if you please. Marcus walked to the grand piano without stumbling. The bench was firm under him, nothing like the plastic stool at the center that wobbled if you shifted weight. He flexed his hands once. The last thing he heard before striking the first note was a muttered, "This should be good," from the Winthrop boy. The hush spread outward like ripples when he lifted his hands. It wasn't respect yet. Not quite. But the whispers had stopped. The center judge hadn't spoken until now. Director Petrov's cufflinks glinted as he steepled his fingers. His smile didn't touch his eyes. "Let me understand," he said. The words arrived slowly like a blade being drawn. "You propose to play Rachmaninoff on a year of practice. Tell me, what model piano do you study on?" Marcus felt the question behind the question. Not just about the instrument. It measured how far he was from belonging here. His tongue moved before his brain could stop it. The community center has a Yamaha PSR E273. A few students covered their mouths. Petrov's eyebrows climbed. A keyboard." He paused. 61 keys, if I recall that model. Not even a full keyboard. He turned to the other judges as if sharing a private joke. The woman in the red blazer looked uncomfortable. Marcus knew this game. A study from the International Journal of Music Education found audition panels spent 38% less time evaluating applicants from non-traditional backgrounds once they revealed their training circumstances. The moment you said community center, their ears closed. Petrov tapped his pen. "Who polished this unorthodox technique of yours?" "A retired pianist." "Mr. Rodriguez." "Rodriguez." Petrov repeated the name like a bad note. "From which conservatory?" "He played cruise ships, then he got arthritis." One of the Winthrop students snorted. Petrov's mouth tightened. How many hours a day under this cruise ship, maestro? 3 before school, 4 after. He supervised the late shift so I could practice. A janitor. Petrov exhaled through his nose. 7 hours on a toy keyboard. And you believe that substitutes for formal training? Someone's phone buzzed in the silence. The air smelled suddenly of cleaning fluid and wilted roses from the lobby arrangements. Marcus thought of the sticky community center keys under his fingers at 3 a.m., the way Mr. Rodriguez would sometimes wake from his doze by the supply closet to say again when Marcus missed a transition. Petrov leaned forward. The Rachmaninoff requires competence beyond. I know what it requires. Marcus heard the echo of his mother's voice warning him about talking back, but it was too late. Sir. He added the honorific a beat too slow. Petrov's lips thinned. Defensive. Posture aside, young man. Let's hear how cruise ship pedagogy handles Rachmaninoff's cadenza. The dismissal in his voice was a physical thing, like a door closing. Marcus felt the weight of the room's expectation, not of success, but of failure. The kind they'd all lean into like a familiar chair. He walked to the Steinway without waiting for permission. The seat was cool under him. He touched middle C once lightly. The note hung in the air like a dare. He didn't look at Petrov when he said it. First movement, full piece. Not just the cadenza. His hands settled over the keys. The first page of sheet music materialized behind his eyelids, not just the notes but the penciled notes in Mr. Rodriguez's shaky hand. More weight here, like lifting something heavy. Someone in the back row whispered, "This is painful." Marcus breathed in. The opening chord of Rachmaninoff's third wasn't technically difficult, a simple A minor triad. But the tone had to land like a stone in still water with perfect weight. He played it. The note vibrated through the hall, not too soft, not too loud, exactly deep enough to suggest what would follow. Petrov's pen froze. Above his scoring sheet, the second chord came, then the third. Marcus didn't rush. He felt the Winthrop boy shift in his seat. The adjudicator in red sat straighter. Only Petrov remained motionless, but his fingers had tightened around his pen. Marcus reached measure 12, where the first real test lay, a run that demanded every key on a full piano. 61 keys wouldn't cut it. He felt rather than saw the room hold its breath. His hands didn't falter. The run spilled from his fingers like water over rock, cresting exactly where it should. Someone gasped. The sound wasn't kind. It was the noise people make when a vase tips but doesn't break. Petrov's chair creaked. He wasn't smiling anymore. The Steinway's middle C still vibrated in the air when Marcus blinked and saw his mother's hands. Elena Chen's fingers were scrubbed raw from the late shift at the hospital. Not a nurse's hands, but a janitor's. The memory hit him, mid-measure. Her standing by the kitchen table last month with their rent envelope in one hand and the conservatory application in the other. One chance, she'd said. Her knuckles were cracked from disinfectant. It's one chance. The audition fee had taken 15 bedpans emptied, 30 floors mopped, 60 trash bags hauled to the dumpster behind the cafeteria. Marcus knew the math. He'd calculated it while watching her limp to the bathroom each morning before sunrise. 3 months ago, when the community center threatened to remove their broken keyboard, Elena had paid for repairs by working double shifts for 2 weeks straight. She'd come home with her scrub smelling of bleach and vomit, her right knee wrapped in a support bandage from all the kneeling to scrub baseboards. A study on parents of art students found 72% sacrificed either health insurance contributions or retirement savings to fund training. Elena had done both. Her emergency fund was now $17 and a subway card with 2 remaining rides. Marcus had found the envelope under her mattress when searching for aspirin after her migraine last Tuesday. The Rachmaninoff's second movement demanded delicate phrasing. As Marcus's left hand traced the melody, he remembered Mr. Rodriguez saying, "True legato wasn't about connecting notes, it was about connecting breaths." Elena's breaths came shallow when she slept these days. Too many nights inhaling ammonia fumes. A key change approached. The sort of transition that made competition judges sit forward. Marcus's fingers knew the shape before his mind registered it. Muscle memory from those 3 a.m. practices when Elena would stumble in from work to find him still at the keyboard. She'd heat congee in their dented microwave without speaking, then set the bowl beside him with a single fork standing upright in the center. Always a fork. They'd lost all their spoons last winter when she pawned the silverware set for his metronome. The concerto swelled toward its first climax. Marcus's right-hand arpeggios mirrored the motion of Elena counting cash at their formica table. Fingers moving fast but never rush, precision mattering more than speed. She'd smoothed each wrinkled bill before sliding it into the audition fee envelope. $327 in mostly 5s and 1s. The registrar's assistant had wrinkled her nose at the smell of hospital disinfectant, still clinging to the money. Petrov's pen tapped in time with the rhythm. Or maybe it was Marcus's pulse, the director's earlier words, cruise ship pedagogy, echoed between measures. Every note answered them. This passage wasn't in the first movement's sheet music. Marcus had added it himself after watching Elena miss a step on the stairs last week, her leg buckling from exhaustion. The left hand played the melody now, with her limp's rhythm. The right hand answered in the exact cadence of her voice, saying, "No overtime this weekend. They gave it to Sandra's boy." The lights above the piano blurred for a second. Not sweat. Marcus never sweated when playing. Mr. Rodriguez said that was the first sign he might be special. The second sign was how he turned shame into sound. The Winthrop student's whispers became staccato eighth notes under his fingers. Petrov's smirk stretched into a dissonant minor ninth chord resolving upward. Elena's sacrifices lived in the spaces between notes, the way she'd sewn his sweater's frayed cuffs with thread pulled from her own scrubs, how she'd stood outside the community center for 2 hours in January rain to convince the director not to report Mr. Rodriguez for staying past closing time. The audition fee had been the final withdrawal from her China trip fund. Ashinian, long. Dream of visiting her parents' village reduced to a sheet of paper with Marcus's name typed at the top. The music crested. The conservatory's stained glass windows rattled in their frames. Somewhere beyond these walls, Elena was mopping a hallway or emptying a trash can. Her hands would be raw when he saw her tonight. But when he played this movement's final measures, the ones Mr. Rodriguez said should sound like someone breaking chains, Marcus knew the blisters on her fingers would have meant something. The transition into the recapitulation came smoother than it ever had during practice. The Steinway's pedals gleamed under Marcus's feet, but his muscle memory lived on the community center's missing sustain pedal, the one Mr. Rodriguez had jerry-rigged with a stack of folded napkins that would slip if you pressed too hard. The old man's voice threaded through the concerto's technically demanding passages, not faster, cleaner. 6 months ago, Marcus had found Rodriguez sleeping on the community center couch again. The director wanted to ban him for overstaying his shifts, but Marcus's mother intervened. Now the old man arrived every morning at 5:30 a.m. precisely, his arthritis-swollen hands carrying sheet music salvaged from dumpsters behind Juilliard prep schools. He never took money. Just asked Marcus to play through each piece once before correcting him. Studies show students from low-income backgrounds with community mentors are 8.3 times more likely to develop advanced skills than those without. Rodriguez didn't cite research when enforcing his 2 non-negotiable rules: scales before breakfast, Bach before bed. His teaching tools consisted of a cracked metronome purchased at a garage sale and a ruler he'd tap against Marcus's wrist when his posture slumped. The Rachmaninoff demanded cross-hand techniques Rodriguez had drilled using quarters. "Miss the transition, I keep the coin," he'd say, balancing 25 cents on the piano's edge. Marcus's first week, Rodriguez claimed $8.75. Last month, the old man had grumbled about needing a second job to fund his losses. Now the concerto's most notorious crossover approached, measure 147, where the left hand must leap 2 octaves, mid-arpeggio. Marcus's fingers recalled the exact weight of Rodriguez's calloused palm, pressing down on his knuckles during practice. Not to the keys, through them. The old man's breath had smelled of instant coffee and the menthol rub he used on his aching joints. A student in the 3rd row checked her watch. Marcus hit the measure perfectly. The quarters would have stayed in his pocket today. Rodriguez's lessons weren't just technical. He'd made Marcus memorize conservatory audition rubrics stolen from a trash bin. Petrov will dock you for visible effort, he'd warned weeks ago, demonstrating how to execute difficult passages without facial tension. Now, as Marcus navigated the concerto's treacherous cadenza, his expression remained as neutral as Rodriguez had beaten into him. The old man's greatest gift was teaching Marcus to listen, not just to notes, but to silence. Every rest is a decision, Rodriguez would say, slapping the sheet music when Marcus rushed pauses. In the conservatory's tense quiet between movements, Marcus waited precisely 3 heartbeats, Rodriguez's preferred count, before beginning the allegro. Winthrop. Students leaned forward despite themselves. Rodriguez had predicted this. Rich kids are trained to admire difficulty, not music. Give them both. Petrov's pen had stopped moving. The director's skepticism faltered at measure 210, where Marcus executed a turn Rodriguez had devised an alternative fingering for because the community center keyboard lacked 3 high notes. The adaptation was better than the original, cleaner with a brighter tonality that cut through the hall. Someone coughed near the fire exit. Rodriguez always said coughs meant you'd hooked them. They forgot to breathe, he'd rasp after Marcus played something particularly arresting. 3 separate coughs punctuated the next 20 measures. The finale approached, a cascading series of octaves Rodriguez had made him practice using only his left hand for weeks. If you can play it with limitations, you'll own it without. Marcus's right hand joined flawlessly now, the Steinway's perfect action magnifying technique honed on stiff, unresponsive keys. Rodriguez wasn't here to see this. He'd refused to come, citing the conservatory's elitist stink. But Marcus could picture him slumped on the community center's plastic couch right now, one hand resting on the silenced keyboard, staring at the clock. He'd know exactly which measure Marcus was playing. He'd know the second the scholarship was secured. As the coda's final chords resonated, Marcus lifted his hands exactly as Rodriguez had taught, palms parallel to the ceiling, fingers relaxed. They'll remember how you finish more than how you start, the old man had insisted, slapping Marcus's wrists whenever he jerked away from the keys. The last note hung in the air longer than physics should allow. 300 miles away, in a room that smelled of mildew and coffee grounds, a retired cruise ship pianist smiled at a silent telephone. He didn't need it to ring. He'd heard every note through the boy's fingers. Marcus's fingers hovered half an inch above the Steinway's keys. The ivory felt cooler than the plastic keyboard at the community center. This piano didn't have missing D-sharps or a sticky B-flat. The pedals responded to the slightest pressure, not like the broken sustain he'd compensated for by holding notes longer with his fingers. Studies suggest 63% of musicians perform better on familiar instruments. This Steinway weighed nearly a ton, 3 times heavier than the Yamaha he'd practiced on. Its polished surface reflected Marcus's face back at him, distorted like the mirrors at the community center bathrooms where he'd washed up before coming here. The Winthrop students had leaned forward when he sat down, not in anticipation, in hunger. They wanted to see fingers accustomed to cheap keys stumble over proper weighted action. Marcus pressed middle C. The note bloomed through, the hall with a resonance his practice keyboard could never produce. His stomach lurched. Mr. Rodriguez had warned him about this. First time on a real grand, you'll either freeze or overplay. Marcus inhaled through his nose. The Steinway smelled of aged wood and lemon oil, nothing like the community center's musty carpet odor. He started slow. The Rachmaninoff's opening measures allowed no room for testing the waters. They demanded instant command. Marcus's left hand found the bass clef progression while his right traced the melody. The keys moved differently, smoother, but requiring less force to produce sound. On the Yamaha, he'd had to hammer certain passages to be heard over the hallway noise. Here, the faintest touch carried. Footsteps shuffled near the doorway. The adjudicators adjusted their papers. They expected hesitation from someone who'd never played a concert grand. Marcus knew the research. Audition panels subconsciously favored applicants whose technique matched their expectations of proper training. Petrov's fingers drummed the table. Measure 12 crept up. the run requiring all 88 keys. Marcus had only practiced it conceptually on 61. His fingers remembered Mr. Rodriguez's solution, an altered fingering pattern that compensated for missing octaves. The Steinway offered its full range now. For the first time, he could play the passage as written. The notes came without thought. The triplets flowed like water finding a new channel. A girl near the window sat straighter. Marcus felt, rather than saw, the change. The room's attention sharpened. Psychological studies suggest elite musicians share one trait: the ability to filter out external judgment during performance. Marcus's focus narrowed to the vibrations traveling up his forearms. The Steinway's action allowed subtleties his practice keyboard erased. The slight delay before releasing a key. The way certain harmonies seemed to glow when played with perfect pressure. The first climax approached. On the Yamaha, this moment always sounded muddy, no matter how clean his fingering. Here, each note separated like colored glass. Marcus leaned into the chord, testing the piano's limits for the first time. The sound filled the arched ceiling. Winthrop students exchanged glances. This wasn't in the script. The charity case wasn't supposed to sound like a prodigy. Marcus saw Petrov's assistant pause her grading. The moment stretched. Research on stereotype threat suggests disadvantaged performers often overcompensate when aware of being judged. Marcus didn't. He played the next phrase exactly as Mr. Rodriguez had taught. No extra flourish to prove a point. The music itself would speak. The Steinway revealed layers in his technique invisible on the Yamaha. The controlled tremolo in measure 30, the barely perceptible rubato between phrases. These weren't imperfections smoothed over, but intentional, choices now audible for the first time. Marcus realized with a shock that he'd been better than he knew. The cheap keyboard had hidden his own skill from him. The double trill section arrived. On 61 keys, this required creative fingering. Now Marcus's hands moved with geometric precision, the Steinway's responsive action transforming a tricky passage into something fluid. Someone dropped a pencil. The clatter echoed an arrest. As Marcus approached the cadenza, he noticed Petrov's pen had stopped moving. The director's face showed nothing, but his shoulders had lost their dismissive slant. The temperature in the room changed, not warmer or colder, but charged like the air before a summer storm. The final arpeggios spilled from Marcus's fingers with a clarity that surprised even him. The Yamaha never let notes decay properly. They just stopped. Here, each tone blended into the next, creating harmonic overtones he'd only imagined before. The last chord hung in the air longer than physics should allow. Marcus kept his hands above the keys a half-beat longer than necessary. Not for show. He needed the extra second to remember how to breathe again. The Steinway's polished surface now showed twin droplets near the bass clef, not sweat. The piano reflected the overhead lights differently when viewed through wet eyes. The concerto's opening theme recurred, transformed. What began as hesitant notes now carried the weight of Marcus's journey, each phrase layered with meanings those polished conservatory students couldn't decode. The music had become something alive, breathing the story of late-night practices and sacrifice. Judges' pens hovered. The Allegro section mirrored Marcus's first desperate attempts on the community center piano, clumsy but determined. The runs weren't just technical passages. They scraped like his mother's mop against hospital linoleum. A minor key transition echoed Mr. Rodriguez's stiff-jointed walk between lessons. The adjudicators leaned forward, sensing something beyond notes. Neuroscience research shows emotionally charged performances activate mirror neurons in audiences. This wasn't just Rachmaninoff anymore. The Winthrop violinist who'd mocked Marcus now gripped his bow case. Petrov's cufflink caught the light as he turned a page, his first movement since the piece began. The development section unfolded like Marcus's year of struggle. Dissonant chords represented skeptical teachers. Ascending scales mimicked his mother climbing staircases between double shifts. The music theory was flawless, but something else pulsed beneath. The raw ache of Elena counting out audition fee, $. A 2021. Berlin musicology study found listeners unconsciously track performers' biographical pain in phrasing choices. Marcus's rubato wasn't textbook perfect. It lingered on certain beats the way Elena lingered at their apartment door each morning, watching him pretend to sleep so she wouldn't worry. The recapitulation arrived with a force that made the red-blazered adjudicator inhale sharply. This was the theme reborn. Not just musical reprise, but the moment talent outgrows circumstance. The dynamic swelled careful loud like Marcus measuring rice portions so his mother could take leftovers to work. 3 separate judges removed their glasses. The Winthrop contingent had stopped exchanging glances. One girl bit her lip during a particularly aching resolution. Marcus wasn't playing for them anymore. He played the way his mother looked, washing her cracked hands at 3 a.m. Methodical, necessary, beautiful in its unadorned truth. The cadenza approached. In conservatories, this was where trained musicians showcased virtuosity. Marcus's fingers flew, but the technique served something deeper. The cross rhythms mirrored Elena juggling bills. The sudden pianissimo echoed Rodriguez whispering, "Again," after a botched measure. Petrov's score sheet lay forgotten. His fingers tapped the table, not the condescending rhythm from before, but the unconscious pulse of someone caught in a story. The director's foot moved slightly, keeping time. A G-string vibrated on someone's abandoned cello. Air conditioning hummed. These usually forbidden sounds didn't break the spell. They deepened it. The music had become bigger than the room, bigger than the judges' scoring rubrics. The Allegro Vivace wasn't just a tempo marking now. It was Marcus racing sunrise to finish practicing before the community center opened. The final presto surged with all the frantic hope of Elena's voice saying, "One chance." Octaves hammered like her knees hitting floors she scrubbed. The concluding chord rang out, then faded into a silence heavier than sound. No one moved. The stillness wasn't just lack of noise, it was the pause before understanding changes. The woman in red touched her collar. The Winthrop violinist stared at his shoes. Petrov's pen rolled off the table. Its click against marble echoed like the first coin Rodriguez ever placed on the piano. Sunlight through stained glass painted the Steinway's lid. Dust motes hung motionless in the beams. Somewhere beyond these walls, a janitor paused mid-scrub. A retired pianist ceased his pacing. A community center stood empty. The silence lasted precisely as long as Mr. Rodriguez had taught Marcus to count between movements. Heartbeat, heartbeat, heartbeat. Then Petrov inhaled sharply through his nose. The sound was rough, uncalculated. The noise a man makes when proven wrong about something fundamental. Marcus kept his hands in his lap. The keys still vibrated with residual warmth. He hadn't just played Rachmaninoff. He'd testified. Now the judges sat in the jury box, their expressions shifting like theater lights adjusting between acts. One adjudicator opened her mouth, closed it. Petrov's chair scraped as he stood. The Winthrop students exchanged a different kind of glance this time. Not derision, but dawning recognition that hierarchies had just realigned. The room exhaled together. In that collective breath lived every assumption about privilege, pedigree, and piano keys dissolving like sugar in hot tea. Marcus counted 6 heartbeats before the first hesitant clap began. Not from the judges' table, but from the soul-born violinist in the back row no one had noticed until now. The applause spread slowly at first, like ice cracking across a pond in early spring. By the time it reached Petrov, the director was already reaching for something in his breast pocket. His other hand gripped the table's edge, knuckles whitening with the effort of remaining upright. The applause died, unevenly. Some hands kept clapping after others had stopped. Director Petrov remained standing, his polished shoes scraping against the hardwood as he turned toward Marcus. The challenge came on the heels of silence, not shouted, but precisely enunciated, so every syllable cut. "If this boy can actually play piano," he said to the room more than to Marcus, "I will kneel." Winthrop students gasped. The woman in red pressed a hand to her collarbone. Auditions never went like this. Research on high-pressure performances shows public stakes raise cortisol levels by 37% in musicians, but Marcus's breathing stayed steady. He'd practiced through worse. The janitor yelling at Rodriguez to vacate the premises, neighborhood kids banging on the community center windows, Elena coming home so tired she forgot to duck when passing their low-hanging light fixture. Petrov wasn't finished. I'll hear the cadenza again, full tempo. His fingers flicked toward the Steinway as if swatting a fly. No pity tempos. The terminology was precise in its cruelty. Pity tempo. The slight slowing some adjudicators allowed disadvantaged applicants. Marcus's fingernails bit into his palms. He thought of Mr. Rodriguez drilling the cadenza at progressively faster speeds until the old metronome broke. Thought of his mother hiding her hands when the dish soap cracked her skin because she'd bought cheap brands to afford his music books. Studies on challenge states versus threat states show one difference: whether the performer views obstacles as opportunities. Marcus flexed his fingers. The back row of students leaned forward. Even the accompanist stopped pretending to review sheet music. Petrov remained standing, his posture declaring this would be the boy's undoing. Marcus had seen this before, not in concert halls, but in the community center when rich donors came to assess programs they funded. That searching stare waiting for a misstep to confirm all suspicions. The key difference? Those observers held checkbooks. Petrov held nothing but his own reputation. Marcus placed his hands above the keys. The cadenza was technically the hardest. 90 seconds of the piece, the solo section where Rachmaninoff's concerto shed all restraint. Mr. Rodriguez had made him play it blindfolded twice a week. If you can find the intervals by ear, he'd said while Marcus fumbled, you'll own them forever. The first notes came quieter than before. Marcus wasn't playing to Petrov's challenge. He played to the old man's cigarette-rasped advice. Music isn't about proving, it's about revealing. The triplets gained clarity as he progressed. Not faster but deeper, each note resonating with the accumulated weight of every time he'd practiced them. A 2020 Berlin Conservatory study found cadenzas performed under challenge conditions exhibit 22% more pronounced articulation. Marcus's fingers moved with that same fierce precision, the intricate passages unfolding like something long buried being unearthed whole. Petrov's arms remained crossed. His left foot tapped, not the board tapping from before, but the involuntary rhythm of someone caught in a current. The Winthrop violinist who'd mocked Marcus earlier gripped his bow case so tight the leather creaked. The music swerved into the cadenza's most treacherous passage, a two-handed chromatic scale in contrary motion. On Marcus's practice keyboard, he'd had to omit notes. The Steinway offered its full range now. He took it. The sound built like gathering thunder. The girl in pearl gray covered her mouth. Marcus's shoulders stayed loose. Rodriguez would have smacked them with a ruler otherwise. The muscles in Petrov's jaw worked. He wasn't expecting this level of control from someone who'd trained on a 61-key keyboard. The final chromatic run ascended into the concerto's highest register. Marcus hit each note cleanly, the Steinway's perfect action rewarding years of compensating for stiff keys. His fingers knew these intervals like Elena knew the count of steps in the hospital stairwell. The resolution chord shook the stained glass. Marcus held it exactly as long as Rodriguez had taught. 3 full seconds, no cheating. Then silence. For the first time, Petrov looked uncertain. His challenge hung in the air like sheet music suspended mid-fall. The adjudicator in red wiped her eyes discreetly. Marcus kept his hands in his lap. He didn't stare at Petrov, didn't smile, just waited. Studies on power dynamics show silence unsettles hierarchical systems more than confrontation. Let the moment stretch. Let the director remember his words. The quiet lasted 7 heartbeats. Then Petrov's shoes shifted on the hardwood. His knees bent slowly, the crease in his trousers sharpening. The director didn't make a show of it, just lowered himself with the deliberate motion of a man fulfilling an unavoidable contract. "No," he said when his kneecaps touched wood. His voice rasped oddly. "Not the cadenza." He swallowed. "Play the whole thing again." Marcus flexed his fingers once. The room made no sound. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. His hands returned to the keys. He'd played Rachmaninoff's Third every day for 6 months. He could play it once more. Petrov's knees hit the hardwood with a sound like 2 books falling. His polished shoes splayed awkwardly. The director didn't catch himself on the table edge, just let the impact travel up through his body until his forehead nearly touched the piano bench. His cufflinks scraped the floor. The Winthrop students froze mid-breath. Auditions never went like this. Studies on expert bias show it takes an average of 7 contradictory data points before specialists revise entrenched judgments. Marcus had provided 37 flawless measures since Petrov's challenge. Tears streaked the director's cheeks. Not delicate concert hall tears, but the kind that distort faces. His shoulders shook under tailored wool. "I have been the artistic director here," he said to the floorboards, "for 18 years. His accent thickened. "That was the most beautiful playing I have heard." A conservatory administrator later leaked the incident report where Petrov wrote, "Student forced me to reconsider the nature of talent itself. In that moment, all he did was stay kneeling while the room's power structure realigned." The adjudicator in red handed him a tissue without looking. Her eyes stayed locked on Marcus. Transformative moments in art follow patterns. Research from the Cologne Institute documents 3 phases: shock at the unfamiliar, involuntary physiological response, then either rejection or profound reassessment. The Winthrop violinist went through all 3 in 90 seconds. First his sneer faded. Then his hands began mimicking fingerings on his knee. Finally, he wiped his palms on his trousers like someone trying to erase old assumptions. Petrov's palms flattened against the floor as he steadied himself. His wedding band clicked against oak. "You will..." His voice cracked. He tried again. "You will play Rachmaninoff at the gala, with full orchestra." Gold-rimmed glasses slid down his nose. He didn't push them back. "I will teach you myself." The offer landed like another piano chord. Elite conservatories reserve personal mentorship for competition winners, not scholarship auditions. Marcus's fingers stayed loose on his knees. He'd practiced through shouting janitors and his mother's muffled crying through thin walls. A weeping director didn't break his focus. Petrov inhaled through his nose. His next words came out measured. Each syllable weighed. "Technique can be taught. What you have..." He gestured weakly at the Steinway. His sleeve left a damp streak on polished wood. "That arrives fully formed or not at all. The psychology of humility in experts suggests such admissions cost more than applause." Petrov's reputation as a merciless gatekeeper had filled concert halls for decades. Now he pressed a hand to his sternum like checking for something lost. His usual cutting commentary, the kind that made conservatory students vomit before juries, dissolved into silence. Marcus stood. The bench legs screeched. He didn't offer to help Petrov up. Not cruelty. He understood the director needed to complete this gesture uninterrupted. Studies on power reversals show the moment lasts longer in witnesses' memories when the vanquished rises without assistance. 23 phones recorded as Petrov gripped the piano leg to stand. His jacket wrinkled irreparably at the knees. The room's tension shifted into something quieter, not respect yet, but the uneasy quiet of a bridge crossed with no return tickets. The director adjusted his cuffs. His usual commanding posture lacked its steel. "We begin Monday," he told Marcus. Not a request. Not quite an order either. Bring whatever sheet music that carnival pianist gave you. The insult lacked its usual bite, more habit than malice. Another conservatory head might have softened the moment with platitudes. Petrov reached into his breast pocket instead. His fountain pen scratched across embossed letterhead without bothering with the table. "Full scholarship, housing, meal plan." The paper trembled slightly as he held it out. "For your mother's sake, tell me you have performance attire." Marcus took the letter. The paper smelled of Petrov's sandalwood cologne and something earthier, sweat from gripping the pen too tight. The director's signature sprawled larger than usual as if compensating for something. "Sir." Marcus swallowed. "Can I call my mother now?" Petrov turned to the windows. The late afternoon sun caught his tear tracks. "Use my office." He cleared. his throat. "There's a facilities worker mopping the north staircase. Send her up when you're done." The Winthrop students looked at each other. No one had ever seen Petrov acknowledge a janitor's existence, much less their labor. Marcus nodded once before walking toward the hallway where payphones lined the wall. His sneakers left no marks on the polished floor, but something in the air had shifted permanently. Petrov watched him go. His assistant later swore she heard him whisper, "God help us all," but when asked, the director claimed it was, "Good playing, all." Either could have been true. The soul-born violinist was already at the water cooler when Marcus passed. He held out a paper cup without speaking. Marcus took it. The water tasted like chlorine and something sweeter, maybe the metallic hint of pipes, or maybe just the flavor of changing your mind about someone. Elena Chen heard the footsteps first, quick, uneven, slapping against linoleum. The mop handle slipped from her hands when she turned. Marcus stood at the stairwell door clutching embossed paper, his chest heaving like he'd run all 4 flights. She saw his face and froze. Years of night shifts had taught her to read expressions in hospital corridors. This wasn't just good news. This was the kind that changes everything. Her knees cracked when she crouched for the fallen mop. The bucket's ammonia scent burned her nostrils. For a ridiculous second, she thought about finishing the section she'd been scrubbing. Habits built from 20 years of cleaning other people's floors didn't break easily. Marcus's sneakers squeaked as he shifted weight. She noticed the hole in his left toe had gotten bigger. "Petrov wants to meet you," he said. The name meant nothing to her. The tremor in his voice meant everything. Studies show 89% of low-income parents experience success guilt, the fear their child's achievement will widen the gap between them. Elena felt it when Marcus extended the letter. Her fingers left damp streaks on the fancy paper. The words "full scholarship" swam in her vision. Below them, housing stipend and meal plan. She'd prepared for rejection, prepared to say it. Didn't matter that the real musicians started at 5 anyway. The acceptance letter listed benefits she hadn't dared imagine. Her knees threatened to buckle. Not from exhaustion, from the sudden absence of weight she'd carried so long. She forgot it was there. Marcus kept talking. "There's a gala they want me to play with." His voice broke. "With an orchestra, Mom." The mop bucket tipped when she grabbed his shoulders. Gray water sloshed over her work shoes. She didn't notice. Her thumbs brushed his collarbones through the thin sweater, the same one she darned 3 times last winter. The seam under his left elbow was still holding. Research on artistic families shows supportive parents have one trait in common. They measure success in relieved silences, not applause. Elena's mouth opened twice before sound came out. "You're one good sweater." She pinched the fabric. "We'll need to get you a better one." Marcus looked at her the way he had at 6 years old, when she'd given him her last dumpling and claimed she wasn't hungry. The parking lot's fluorescent lights caught the acne scar by his temple, the one from when he'd passed out during finals week from practicing instead of eating. A janitor's cart rattled by. They were blocking the stairwell. Elena reached for the mop automatically. Marcus caught her wrist. His fingers were stronger now. Pianist's fingers, not the soft hands that used to cling to her scrubs. "The director said," his voice cracked again. "He said send you up when you're ready." Elena stared at her cleaning cart. The ammonia bottle needed refilling. The string mop had worn thin. She'd been tallying the cost of replacing them yesterday, calculating how many late shifts it would take. The elevator doors opened down the hall. Laughing students spilled out wearing cashmere sweaters and leather shoes. Elena's grip tightened on the mop handle. Marcus stepped between her and them without seeming to realize he'd moved. "I told him you're my mother," he said quietly. "Not that you work here." Wind blew through the parking garage, carrying the smell of gasoline and distant rain. Elena's lower back ached from 6 straight hours of mopping. She looked at the letter again. The embossed conservatory crest glinted under fluorescent lights. "Come on." Marcus took the mop from her hands. He propped it against the wall with a deliberateness That said, he knew exactly what it meant to leave work unfinished. Petrov's office is on the 3rd floor. Elena touched her hair without thinking. The bun had come loose hours ago. Strands stuck to her neck with sweat and cleaning fumes. Marcus didn't seem to notice. He just held out his hand, the same way she'd done for him outside kindergarten 20 years ago. Her shoes left wet footprints all the way to the elevator. The students inside fell silent when they entered. Marcus pressed the button without looking at them. The doors closed on a reflection Elena barely recognized. A woman standing straight for the first time in years, her son's fingers laced. Through hers, the weight of borrowed sheet music and overdue bills finally, blessedly gone. The elevator jerked upward. Marcus's thumb rubbed circles over her knuckles. She thought about the last time they'd ridden an elevator together. 3 months ago at the community center, when she'd pretended not to notice him counting the change in her wallet. "Mom." His whisper tickled her ear. "They have a practice room with a view of the whole city." The numbers above the door ticked past 2. Elena squeezed his hand. Somewhere above them, a world she'd only ever cleaned was waiting to meet them both. 23 phone cameras recorded Petrov kneeling, some openly, others angled through jacket sleeves. The footage spread before the conservatory dust settled on Marcus's scholarship letter. By midnight, shaky vertical clips flooded platforms under hashtags the school had never trended with before. Sacre's gatekeep that trended locally. Rachmaninoff Challenge went national when a Juilliard first-year attempted the concerto's cadenza in her dorm lounge. The conservatory's social media manager woke to 42,000 notifications. Her coffee went cold scrolling. Through edits, Marcus's opening chords spliced against luxury piano showrooms, audio layered over videos of kids practicing on cardboard keyboards. A teen in Detroit streamed herself playing Marcus's arrangement on a garage sale Casio. The view counter hit 6 figures before lunch. Research shows institutions facing viral reckonings follow predictable patterns. First dismissal, then containment attempts, finally adaptation. The dean's initial statement called the footage misleadingly cropped. That lasted until the Soulborn violinist uploaded the full 15-minute clip with captions detailing each elitist remark. Comments poured in from community music teachers, self-taught musicians, even a Grammy-winning producer who wrote, "Kid plays like he's got something to prove. Best kind." The Winthrop Academy Instagram account went private. Their last post, a showcase of scholarship recipients, drew hundreds of quote tweets with screenshots of Marcus's audition time slot conflicting with their recital. Someone uploaded footage of their students whispering during his performance. The hashtag #check your privilege accompanied clips of Marcus collecting his mother from the custodial closet. Conservatory alumni split. A world-touring pianist tweeted, "This is why we lose generational talent." Another posted conservatory practice room rates with the caption, "How many janitor salaries equal 1 semester?" Institute board members received forwarded studies showing 78% of competition winners came from families able to afford private tutors before age 10. Petrov stayed silent. His assistant leaked an email where he requested immediate review of scholarship audition protocols. The attached memo suggested reserving 2 spots per cycle for applicants from non-traditional backgrounds. When pressed by the board, he reportedly slammed his fist on the conference table and said, "You heard the same playing I did." Marcus's community center became a pilgrimage site. Local news filmed kids lining up to touch the battered Yamaha. Mr. Rodriguez held impromptu master classes until the director reminded him he still wasn't an authorized instructor. The center's donation portal crashed after someone shared Elena's cleaning schedule, superimposed with Marcus's practice hours. By week's end, the narrative outpaced the conservatory's damage control. A TikTok stitch juxtaposed Petrov's infamous no-full keyboard jab with footage of Marcus flawlessly executing the octave jumps. The clip accumulated 2.1 million likes before the conservatory's PR team could draft a response. The school's transformation happened in stages. First, they quietly removed the letter of recommendation from a recognized instructor requirement. Then they announced an instrument donation drive, gently used grants for community organizations. When reporters asked about the sudden reforms, the dean cited ongoing conversations about access in the arts. Marcus's old keyboard got displayed in the conservatory lobby. A small plaque read, "Talent recognizes no barriers." Students began sneaking in after hours to play it, not for mockery, but something closer to reverence. The Yamaha's missing D-sharp became a badge of honor. Applicants started mentioning community center training in their essays. 2 weeks after the audition, the conservatory launched Prelude, an outreach program pairing professors with neighborhood music programs. Petrov volunteered to teach the first Saturday workshop. Faculty rumored he selected students who reminded him of Marcus, not in technique, but in the particular way they leaned forward when someone said, "Play it again." The soul-born violinist started a vlog documenting her own scholarship journey. Her third episode featured Mr. Rodriguez explaining how to finger Rachmaninoff's cadenza on a 61-key keyboard. The comment section filled with compromised workarounds, cardboard piano diagrams, apps that simulated weighted action, photos of handmade practice pedals. Elena's hospital transferred her to day shift. Administration never explained why. Her new supervisor mentioned something about deserving to see sunlight after all those years. The first morning she woke without an alarm, she found Marcus already at their kitchen table, scribbling fingerings on the conservatory manuscript paper. Petrov had given him David. The sole violinist began leaving practice room snacks on Marcus's piano. Rumor spread he'd petitioned to have janitorial staff included in the faculty lunch program. 2 juniors started a non-profit connecting retired musicians with students in underserved schools. They named it after the community center's street address. The Steinway in Petrov's studio still bore the scuff marks where Marcus's audition sheet music had trembled against its fallboard. The director left them there. Sometimes at night, long after the practice rooms emptied, cleaners reported hearing someone play Rachmaninoff's Third through the walls. Not perfectly, but with the kind of hunger money couldn't buy. The community center piano still bore the scratches from decades of children's lessons when Mr. Rodriguez first heard Marcus play, a retired orchestra pianist with fingers thickened by arthritis. He hadn't intended to teach again. But something about the boy's stumbling attempts at Mozart made him linger after his weekly volunteer shift. He pulled up a folding chair without asking permission. By sunset, their first lesson had run 2 hours overtime. Critics of public arts programs often claimed real talent needed elite training. They pointed to broken keyboards in church basements and volunteer teachers like Rodriguez as proof. What they didn't see were the calluses forming on Marcus's fingers from 3-hour practices after school. Or the way Rodriguez adjusted his teaching style when he noticed Marcus learned better by ear than sheet music. The old pianist would tap rhythms on the boy's shoulder during scales, turning technical drills into something closer to dance. Research shows students in community programs frequently outperform conservatory peers in creative problem-solving. Without expensive instruments, they learn to make music with whatever's available. Marcus's ability to translate between his plastic keyboard fingering and the Steinway's weighted action came directly from those adaptations. Rodriguez had insisted he practice on 6 different pianos around the city, including an out-of-tune upright at a homeless shelter. When the viral video of Marcus's audition hit 3 million views, journalists swarmed Rodriguez's apartment. They expected sentimental stories about sacrifice. Instead, the old man showed them his calendar filled with other students' lessons. "This one's raising 3 siblings," he'd say, pointing at a Tuesday slot. "Her mother drives her 40 minutes each way." The media frenzy briefly made him a symbol, but his real legacy lived in those scribbled names. Within weeks, instrument donations flooded the community center. A piano tuner volunteered monthly services. The conservatory where Marcus now studied established an outreach program bearing Rodriguez's name, sending advanced students to teach in underserved neighborhoods. Skeptics argued these measures were temporary publicity stunts. Then they heard the first recital from Rodriguez's newest pupil, an 8-year-old who played a Chopin etude with her left hand while her right arm healed in a cast. Rodriguez never took credit for Marcus's success, When pressed, he'd describe watching the boy's fingers find the music behind the notes. "Talent isn't taught," he told one reporter, "just uncovered." His wrinkled hands would mimic playing scales in the air between them. Then he'd change the subject to whichever student needed next month's bus passes covered. The donated Steinway installed at the community center arrived with a plaque honoring Rodriguez. He had it moved next to the old upright so duets could be played across generations of instruments. At the dedication ceremony, Marcus performed a piece blending Rachmaninoff's complexity with the folk tunes Rodriguez hummed during breaks. Reporters missed the reference, but the old pianist's smile deepened at each familiar turn of phrase. Educational studies would later confirm what Rodriguez knew instinctively, that access to arts training alters brain development regardless of socioeconomic status. Neuroscientists marveled at scans showing how musical practice strengthens neural pathways used in advanced mathematics. Policy experts cited Marcus's case when lobbying for arts funding. Rodriguez kept teaching, though his roster now included the grandchildren of his earliest students. On Sundays, Marcus returned to the center for duets with his old mentor. Their audiences grew each week. Parents with toddlers, teenagers skipping, basketball games, retired nurses who'd never attended a concert hall. The chairs were still mismatched, the piano bench repaired with duct tape. But when Rodriguez's arthritic hands joined Marcus on the keys, the music erased every doubt about where talent could bloom. Jennifer Lawrence had been tuning her violin when Marcus walked into the audition hall. Her bow paused mid-stroke on the E string. She took in his second-hand sweater, the way his sheet music curled at the edges, and relaxed. Another charity case. Her stand partner smirked. They'd both seen dozens of these hopefuls crumble under Petrov's gaze. She'd prepared for this audition since age 6. Her family's summer home in the Berkshires had a soundproofed practice cabin. Her teacher flew in from Vienna twice a month. The Rachmaninoff concerto lived in her muscle memory after 3 years of study. When her turn came, she played flawlessly. Not a single missed harmonic, her phrasing elegant as her grandmother's silver tea service. The judges nodded appreciatively. One even smiled. Then Marcus sat at the Steinway. Jennifer's first reaction was visceral. Her stomach tightened when his opening notes rang clearer than hers had. She caught herself leaning forward, bow digging, into her thigh. The ink on her perfect score sheet suddenly felt childish. Studies show elite musicians experience physical stress responses when hearing unexpectedly superior performances. Jennifer's palms dampened. Her pulse thudded in her fingertips where they gripped the violin's neck. This wasn't supposed to happen. The conservatory only accepted 2 full scholarship students per cycle. She'd assumed the other would be David, the sole prodigy, not some boy who practiced on a keyboard missing keys. The second movement unfolded. Jennifer's teacher had drilled her on proper Rachmaninoff interpretation, controlled rubato, precise dynamic shifts. Marcus played like he'd dug the notes from his ribs, his crescendos built like storms, his pauses heavier than her teacher's metronome. The Winthrop students fidgeted. Jennifer sat very still. When Petrov knelt, her bow slipped to the floor. The clatter echoed. No one turned. All eyes stayed fixed on the piano, where Marcus's fingers moved faster than should be possible. Jennifer had performed at Carnegie Hall last year. She'd never made a director weep. Backstage after the results, she rehearsed gracious loser remarks. Her reflection in the green room mirror looked pale. The words died when Marcus walked in alone, clutching his scholarship letter. He didn't gloat, just nodded at her violin case. "You're Jennifer Lawrence." "How?" "Your recording of Paganini's Caprice No. 5. He rubbed his thumb against the letter's edge. "I slowed it down to half speed trying to learn the bowing technique." Jennifer's face warmed. That recording had taken 47 takes. The record label's producer had nearly quit. Psychological studies confirm praise from unexpected sources carries disproportionate weight. Jennifer's usual dismissal of lesser-trained musicians caught in her throat. She looked at Marcus's hands. No manicure, nails trimmed short and uneven. They just outplayed every pianist in the region. "We should trade sometime." The offer surprised her. "You show me bowing. I'll show you how Rodriguez taught octaves." The stand partner who'd smirked earlier gasped. Jennifer ignored her. A strand of hair fell from her perfect bun as she nodded. Rivalries in elite music programs follow predictable arcs, usually ending in sabotage or bitter avoidance. Jennifer's Instagram followers expected shade when she posted about the auditions. Instead, she uploaded a clip of Marcus's cadenza with the caption, "New standard achieved." The conservatory's rumor mill churned when she requested duet rehearsal slots with him. By mid-semester, their partnership yielded unexpected dividends. Marcus's intuitive phrasing seeped into Jennifer's playing, loosening her technique without sacrificing precision. She, in turn, helped him navigate the unspoken rules of elite music circles, which receptions to attend, how to handle press inquiries, which competitions mattered. They practiced in the East Wing's smallest studio, away from gawkers. Jennifer stopped flinching when Marcus played passages wrong but better. He stopped apologizing for not knowing the right way. When Petrov assigned them Brahms's violin sonatas, their contrasting styles created something neither could alone. Jennifer's polished tempering Marcus's raw power, his emotional risk-taking pushing her beyond perfectionism. The spring gala billed them as soloists. Backstage, Jennifer adjusted Marcus's bow tie. His fingers drummed nervous rhythms on his thighs. She recognized the habit from watching him practice at the community center during her covert visits. "You'll be brilliant," she said. Her grandmother's. Pearls brushed his shoulder. Marcus smiled. "We will." The curtain rose. Jennifer's violin met his piano in the opening measures. The critics would later call their performance revelatory. For now, there was only the music and the quiet dissolution of assumptions about where it could come from. David Kim watched Marcus's audition from the back row with his violin case balanced on his knees. His fingernails tapped the latches. Through the entire performance, first in skepticism, then in recognition, finally in something like kinship. When the director knelt, David was the first to clap. The sound startled the Winthrop students beside him. They came from different oceans, but similar currents. David's scholarship journey began when a soul music teacher heard him playing scraps of Vivaldi on a borrowed violin. His parents worked double shifts to pay for lessons with the soul instructor in their district, who'd take payments in installments. The conservatory application process nearly broke them. The flights for auditions cost more than their monthly rent. Marcus found David practicing Mendelssohn in a fourth-floor stairwell the next morning. The acoustics were better there than in the practice rooms, David explained without looking up. His bow kept moving. "You play like someone who's had to fight for every note," he said between phrases. Research shows diverse artistic cohorts produce 32% more innovative performances. David's phrasing incorporated techniques from traditional Korean folk music. Marcus's rhythms carried echoes of the subway trains beneath his old neighborhood. When they played together for the first time, an impromptu Bach sonata, their contrasting styles created tension, then resolution, then something neither could name. The Winthrop students called them the scholarship brothers behind their backs. David didn't correct them. He started leaving annotated sheet music on Marcus's piano. The notes were in careful English mixed with Korean musical terms no instructor here would recognize. Language barriers made David seem aloof at first. He misunderstood social cues, laughed at unexpected moments. When Marcus asked about his parents, David's response took 3 days to arrive. A photo texted at 2 a.m. Seoul time of his mother holding his first childhood violin. The bridge was cracked, the fingerboard worn to splinters. Their study sessions followed no set pattern. Some nights they deconstructed Paganini passages measure by measure. Others, David taught Marcus Korean drinking songs while chewing gum that tasted of honey ginger. The practice room walls absorbed everything. The wrong notes, the laughter, the occasional frustrated Korean curses David forgot to translate. During master classes, they sat together. David whispered running commentary in Marcus's ear, translating Petrov's obscure references into plain terms. "He means your wrist is too stiff," he'd muttered during critiques. "Like when you tried to open that jam jar last week." Marcus returned the favor by explaining American idioms that left David baffled. A 2022 study on cross-cultural mentorship found pairs like theirs achieved faster skill acquisition than homogeneous partners. David's instinct for melodic structure complemented Marcus's rhythmic innovation. They began marking each other's sheet music, red pencil for phrasing adjustments, blue for dynamics. The pages grew colorful as their techniques intertwined. Cafeteria meals became language exchanges. Marcus learned the Korean word for crescendo. David mastered the right intonation for ain't no way. They traded childhood stories. Marcus's about sneaking into the community center after hours. David's about practicing in his apartment stairwell so neighbors wouldn't complain. When the semester's first quartet assignments came, they requested each other. The other players, both legacy admits, stiffened during rehearsals. David and Marcus shared a glance when the violist complained about non-standard interpretations. The following week, they brought in a rearranged Dvorak that incorporated elements of Pansori rhythm. The teacher called it revelatory. The violist transferred groups. David's mother sent care packages, chocolate-covered rice cakes, handmade, finger guards, socks with little violin patterns. Marcus's mother invited him for weekends filled with excessive portions of lo mein and questions about Korean cooking techniques. Elena's English-Korean phrasebook appeared on the coffee table. Dog-eared at music terms, practice room number 407 became their unofficial territory. David tacked up a postcard of Seoul Tower. Marcus taped a subway map from his old neighborhood. They spent hours there analyzing competition tapes, not realizing they were creating their own dialect. Part musical terminology, part inside jokes, part untranslatable understanding. The spring gala placed them side by stage. David's solo came first. His violin sang with techniques no European conservatory could teach, slides and vibratos borrowed from Gaiagium players. Then Marcus took the piano. When their eyes met before the first note, neither needed to speak. Backstage afterward, David presented Marcus with a new metronome. "For our next project," he said. The gift was second-hand, but pristine, its ticking perfectly even. Marcus recognized the make, the same model Mr. Rodriguez had used. They walked home through the city's late-night streets, instrument cases bumping together. David hummed a folk tune Marcus now knew was about fishermen working dawn tides. The melody carried them past storefronts and subway grates, two different rhythms finding the same pulse. A street musician recognized David and called out in Korean. David answered while digging in his pocket for spare change. He dropped the coins in the open guitar case, then gestured to Marcus. "He's good," he told the musician. "Not as good as me, but close." Marcus shoved him. David shoved back. The streetlight caught their laughter as they turned the corner toward the dorms, still arguing about whose turn it was to buy breakfast. Their shadows stretched long behind them, overlapping on the pavement like musical staves. Marcus found his assigned practice room on the third-floor west wing. The placard on the door read, "Reserved, 2 to 6 p.m. daily." Inside, a Steinway Model B waited under recessed lighting. Its polished surface reflected the ceiling tiles perfectly, no fingerprints, no dust. The bench adjusted to his height with a simple lever. No duct tape holding the padding together. The first sessions felt like relearning his own hands. On the community center's Yamaha, he'd developed a heavy touch to compensate for unresponsive keys. Here, the slightest pressure produced sound. His opening scales came out harsh until he recalibrated. Research shows musicians adjusting to superior instruments initially regress by 14% in precision before surpassing previous skill ceilings. Marcus's metronome confirmed it. His Bach preludes wobbled for 3 days straight. By week 2, his fingers discovered nuances the Yamaha had masked. The Steinway revealed imperfections in his legato technique, tiny gaps between notes that hadn't mattered on stiff keys. He practiced transitions for hours, adjusting finger angles millimetrically. The room's acoustic panels absorbed every sound, creating a feedback loop where he could hear exactly what needed fixing. Studies on practice environments show consistency accelerates skill acquisition. Unlike the community center, where basketball practice sometimes drowned out the piano, This room maintained 68-degree temperature and 40% humidity year-round. The lighting never flickered, the pedals never stuck. Marcus left his scores on the desk knowing they'd be untouched upon return. Petrov stopped by unannounced one afternoon. He said nothing as Marcus worked through a problematic Chopin etude passage. After the fourth repetition, he placed 2 fingers on the fallboard. "You're pressing into the keys like they'll disappear." He mimed the motion. "The piano isn't running away. Let it sing for you." The next morning, Marcus tried it. He lightened his touch by 15%. The etude's melody line emerged clearer, its harmonics glowing beneath. He'd been fighting the instrument like an opponent when it wanted to be a partner. David started joining him Thursdays. They discovered the Steinway's sostenuto pedal could isolate individual bass notes during violin-piano duets, an effect impossible on lesser instruments. Their Saint-Saëns arrangement grew, denser, more layered. The Winthrop students who once mocked them now loitered outside the door, pretending not to eavesdrop. By mid-semester, Marcus's technique transformed. Octaves that once strained his hands now flowed effortlessly. The piano's balanced action allowed passages at tempos he'd only dreamed of. His old Yamaha had been like running in sand. This was sprinting on track. When he returned to the community center to visit Mr. Rodriguez, the plastic keys felt foreign under his fingers. The room accumulated traces of him, a coffee stain on the ledge, a pencil groove in the music desk where he marked tricky measures. The custodians left these undisturbed. Someone tacked up a faded photo of the old Yamaha beside the Steinway's serial number plaque. The contrast made Marcus pause sometimes, the cracked plastic versus the gleaming ebony. Petrov assigned increasingly complex repertoire, knowing Marcus wouldn't waste the instrument's potential. Rachmaninoff's Etudes Tableau replaced Mozart sonatas. The piano handled everything without protest, its 7-octave range opening compositional possibilities the Yamaha had physically barred. Marcus's left hand stretches increased by a minor third within 2 months. At night, security guards reported hearing music long after official hours ended. They'd find Marcus practicing scales while staring at the photo of his first keyboard. The guards never interrupted. Something about the scene made them walk softly past the door. His mother visited once. She sat in the corner chair for 20 silent minutes watching his hands move across keys worth more than her annual salary. When he finished, she only said, "It suits you." Then she kissed his forehead and left, her footsteps echoing down the hall. The semester's final jury required memorized recitals. Marcus chose the same Rachmaninoff concerto that had won him this room. The notes came easier now, not because he'd mastered them, but because he finally had the tools to explore their edges. After his performance, Petrov handed back the score with only 2 markings. Both were in blue pencil, a color reserved for excellence. Marcus looked up in surprise. The director gestured to the ceiling. "The room sounds different when you play." Then he walked out, leaving Marcus alone with the piano and its unlimited potential. Petrov's office smelled of rosin and pipe tobacco. The first lesson began with silence, 14 minutes of Marcus sitting while the director pretended to review reports. When Petrov finally spoke, he didn't mention Rachmaninoff. "Tchaikovsky wrote concertos to pay rent," he said, pushing a contract across the desk. "You'll learn that before scales." The papers outlined a recording deal Petrov had negotiated for him. Royalties, residuals, creative control percentages. Marcus's fingers twitched toward the piano in the corner. Petrov blocked the path with his chair. "Business first," he said. "Art second." A study from Berkeley College found only 9% of conservatories teach contract literacy. Petrov's students learned it faster than sonata form. Their lessons followed. No set pattern. Some days they dissected marketing strategies for young soloists. Others, Petrov made Marcus sight-read legal jargon like musical notation. "Fermata here," he'd say, tapping a non-compete clause. "Means hold for renegotiation." The director's early disdain had transformed into something sharper. Not warmth, but the intense focus of a sculptor seeing raw material where others saw rock. During breaks, Petrov shared trade secrets, how to spot predatory management clauses, which competitions offered hidden leverage. Once he diagrammed fee structures on a napkin while Marcus ate lunch. "They'll call you ungrateful for asking questions," Petrov said, circling a tiny percentage. "Ask anyway." The transition from critic to mentor wasn't smooth. Petrov still snapped when Marcus played rubato too freely, but now the criticism came with context. "Collectors want predictable emotion," he explained after one tirade. "Your job is to surprise them anyway, within the measures they've paid for." Research shows transformational mentors adapt methods to students' backgrounds. Petrov stopped assuming Marcus knew concert hall etiquette. Instead, he taught it as deliberately as fingerings: when to bow, how to handle backstage interviews, why certain donors required flattery. "Your talent got you in," he said during an etiquette drill. "This keeps you here." Marcus learned to navigate the industry's unspoken rules. Petrov made him memorize 3 versions of his origin story: one for benefactors, emphasizing grit; one for press, highlighting the conservatory's role; one for himself, the truth. They practiced deflecting classist questions until Marcus could redirect conversations mid-sentence. The business lessons often bled into artistic ones. After reviewing a recording contract's fine print, Petrov would pivot to phrasing. "That cadenza is your leverage," he'd say. "Play it like you know what it's worth." His teaching style mirrored the music itself, structured frameworks containing bursts of improvisation. Petrov reserved Fridays for professional disasters. He'd recount famous career crashes, then make Marcus strategize recovery plans. A Juilliard. Study later confirmed this method reduced performance anxiety by 28%. Knowing the worst-case scenario made it manageable. By spring, their sessions expanded beyond the office. Petrov took Marcus to contract negotiations, whispering commentary like a sports announcer. "Watch how he avoids commitment to touring dates," he'd murmur at industry lunches. "Cheat your trills the same way when sight reading." The practical lessons balanced Marcus's natural idealism. Where Mr. Rodriguez had taught music as pure expression, Petrov framed it as both art and currency. "Every note has 2 values," he said, during a particularly brutal Rachmaninoff session. "What it means and what it earns." Their most heated arguments centered on compromise. Petrov insisted Marcus perform lightweight encores for donors. "They pay for the Rachmaninoff," the director said, "but remember you during the Chopin waltzes." Marcus resisted until Petrov showed him the fiscal reports, how those waltzes funded outreach programs. The final exam came unexpectedly. Petrov booked Marcus for a corporate gala, then handed him a drastically revised program an hour before stage call. "CEO's wife loves Debussy," he said. "Ditch the Beethoven." Marcus's fingers shook as he transposed Clair de Lune on the spot. Afterward, Petrov approved the check, then made him calculate taxes on the spot. 20% for agent, he dictated as Marcus scribbled. 30 for taxes. The rest? He paused. Invest in better dress shirts. Their last pre-graduation lesson finished where they'd begun, with the Rachmaninoff score that started it all. Petrov marked one final correction in blue pencil. Then he closed the book and reached for his coat. "You'll hate me in 10 years, he said at the door. "Then you'll understand." Marcus stayed behind at the piano. The Steinway's lid reflected the fading evening light through windows Petrov never bothered to clean. He played the concertos, opening measures softly, fingers remembering both the community center's sticky keys and the director's relentless standards. Down the hall, Petrov paused near the stairwell. His shoulders relaxed incrementally as the music reached him, measure by measure. He adjusted his cufflinks once, a habitual gesture, then descended into the gathering dark without looking back. The concert hall lights dimmed as Marcus Chen walked onto the stage. The same Steinway Model D waited for him, but now it sat at the center of a full orchestra. 29 bows lifted in unison as the first violinist nodded to him. This time the silence before he played wasn't skeptical, it was electric with expectation. 6 months had passed since his audition went viral. The conservatory's social media team had tracked over 8 million views of that shaky phone footage. Every news outlet wanted interviews. Masterclass invitations flooded in. But tonight was different. Tonight meant proving that viral moment wasn't a fluke. Pressure clung to his dress shirt like the stage light's heat. On the front row, Director Petrov sat ramrod straight in a new suit, his usual scowl replaced by something fiercer: pride. 3 seats down, Jennifer from the auditions clutched her program too tightly. The air smelled of rosin and wilting bouquet stems. Most performers crumble under this kind of scrutiny. Studies show 72% of competition winners report severe anxiety before their first major performance. The ones who survive learn to channel it, to treat fear as fuel rather than paralysis. Marcus flexed his fingers once, twice, remembering the community center keyboard's stiff keys. The conductor's baton lifted. Marcus exhaled through the opening rest, then struck the first dissonant chord of Rachmaninoff's cadenza. The strings answered like a thunderclap. His fingers remembered every measure Mr. Rodriguez had drilled into him, every late-night repetition while his mother slept in the next room. The music unfolded like it had during the audition, but louder now, bolder, the difference between telling a secret and shouting a truth. Critics often misunderstand what makes a performance memorable. Technique matters, but it's the emotional signature that lingers. When Marcus hit the concerto's third movement climax, the violinist beside him missed an entrance. She was too busy watching his hands. Petrov's bet, the kneeling, the tears, had raised impossible expectations. But Marcus didn't play to them. He played through them. His trills in the coda weren't cleaner than the audition. They were messier, more alive. A high G-sharp rang slightly sharp in the hall's dry acoustics, and he let it hang there, defiant. The final chord faded into a silence deeper than absence of sound. Then the crowd erupted. Petrov was first on his feet, clapping with the force of someone trying to fracture his own palms. Jennifer wiped her eyes with her sleeve. In the third-tier balcony, Elena Chen pressed both hands to her mouth, her gold cleaner's uniform swapped for a borrowed navy dress. Backstage afterward, a conservatory trustee handed Marcus an envelope. Inside gleamed an invitation to tour with the orchestra next season. Petrov gripped his shoulder too hard and muttered something about recording contracts, but Marcus was already looking past them, toward the practice rooms where 3 scholarship students from the community center waited with questions. The real test wasn't playing well when everyone expected greatness. It was remembering how to play when no one was watching. Tomorrow morning he'd be back at the piano by 7, working through scales while the janitors buffed the floors. A stagehand nudged him toward the green room, where champagne flutes clinked. Someone had propped open the fire door to let in the November air. Through it, Marcus could see the rooftop of his old apartment building, its laundry lines still flapping in the wind. Marcus stood in front of the same community center piano. He'd started on, its chipped keys now surrounded by 6 kids perched on plastic chairs. The youngest, Luis, swung his legs so his toes barely brushed the floor. The oldest, Aisha, held her notebook with both hands like it might fly away. They all stared at Marcus like he'd walked out of a movie screen. The Yamaha still had 32 missing keys. Someone had duct-taped the sustain pedal into a semi-functional position. The bench wobbled when Marcus sat. He adjusted it the way Mr. Rodriguez had taught him, tilted slightly forward to keep his posture straight. The kids copied the motion, on their chairs. A study from Yale School of Music found alumni who maintained ties to their training roots were 40% more likely to sustain long careers. Marcus didn't quote statistics. He placed his hands on the keys and said, "This right here? This got me into the conservatory." Luis gasped. Aisha squinted like she was checking for tricks. The first lesson was scales. Marcus demonstrated the C major run slowly, then had them take turns. A boy named Jamal hit 2 wrong notes and froze. "Keep going," Marcus said. "I once played an entire recital with my fly down." The lie made Jamal laugh through his mistakes. Elena stopped by during her lunch break. She leaned against the doorframe with her janitorial cart, watching Marcus adjust Aisha's wrist position. Later, at home, she told him she'd cried in the supply closet. Not from sadness. From seeing Luis's mom, who scrubbed bathrooms at the hospital, watch her son with the same hungry hope Elena once had. Balancing conservatory workload with weekly lessons proved harder than expected. Marcus often arrived exhausted, blinking coffee grounds from his eyes. Then Jamal would show him a new chord he'd taught himself, or Aisha would nail a passage she'd struggled with. Their progress fueled him more than caffeine. The community center director tried to give Marcus the good practice room, the one with acoustic panels. He refused, insisting they use the multi-purpose space where basketballs sometimes bounced during Mozart. If they can focus here, he told the director, a concert hall will feel easy. Mr. Rodriguez started appearing during lessons. He never spoke, just nodded from the back wall, arthritis-swollen fingers tapping rhythms on his knees. Sometimes he'd mutter corrections that Marcus would repeat verbatim, as if they were his own ideas. The kids didn't need to know whose wisdom it was. They just absorbed it. By the third month, the lessons expanded. Marcus brought Jennifer one week to teach basic music theory, David the next to demonstrate violin techniques. When Petrov heard about it, he donated 10 boxes of old sheet music. Inventory overflow, he claimed, though the penciled fingering suggested careful curation. The kids' progress wasn't linear. Luis still mixed up sharps and flats. Jamal struggled with tempo, but Aisha mastered Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor by spring. When she played it for her classmates, the basketball players outside paused their game to listen. Marcus worried sometimes, was he teaching them to rely on shortcuts like he'd had to? Then Jamal stayed after class to ask about conservatory practice hours. My mom says I can't go unless I get a scholarship, he said, wiping fingerprints off the keys. So tell me how. The question haunted Marcus. He started compiling resources, scholarship deadlines, grant applications, a step-by-step guide to audition tapes. Jennifer helped format it into a pamphlet they distributed citywide. Within weeks, 4 other community centers launched similar programs using their template. Petrov visited unannounced one rainy Tuesday. He watched from the doorway as Marcus coached Aisha through a difficult chord progression. The director said nothing when she flubbed it 3 times, nor when she finally nailed it on the 4th. But his expression shifted when Jamal, without prompting, reached over and fixed her fingering. That evening, Petrov emailed the conservatory board. His proposal, 2 guaranteed scholarship slots per year for students from partnered community programs. The vote passed unanimously. When Marcus heard, he reset all his lesson plans to include audition strategies. Aisha was first to try. Her hands shook so badly during the preliminary round that she missed her opening notes. Marcus, watching from the panel, did nothing. She recovered alone, finishing stronger than she'd started. Later, when the acceptance letter came, she stared at it for 10 full minutes before believing it was real. The cycle spun onward. Jamal took over Marcus's Tuesday lessons when conservatory requirements intensified. Luis's mom started night classes to become a music therapist. The Yamaha finally got replaced with a donated baby grand, though Marcus insisted they keep it in the multi-purpose room, where the squeak of sneakers could keep everyone honest. Centers like this rarely produced prodigies. That was fine. Marcus wasn't trying to replicate his own trajectory. He wanted what Mr. Rodriguez had given him, not a guaranteed path, but a fighting chance. At semester's end, the kids prepared a surprise recital. They chose Rachmaninoff's opening measures, simplified, but recognizable. When Marcus heard the first notes, his throat tightened. The phrasing was all wrong, the dynamics uneven. It was the most beautiful music he'd ever heard. Afterward, Jamal asked to see his conservatory practice room. Someday, Marcus promised. He didn't add that someday might come sooner than any of them expected, that Petrov had mentioned an assistant teaching position opening next year. For now, he hauled the Yamaha back onto center stage where it belonged, its missing keys no longer gaps but opportunities. Luis plinked out a C scale with one finger. Marcus didn't correct him. These early notes didn't need perfect technique. They just needed someone to listen. The first European tour invitation arrived on heavy cream stationery. Marcus turned it over 3 times, checking for some mistake, but there his name sat, embossed beneath the Vienna Philharmonic's logo. Petrov grunted when shown the letter. "They'll expect you to wear tails," was all he said before sliding a tailor's business card across the desk. Success came in waves after the conservatory graduation. Competition wins led to recording contracts. Masterclass requests piled up alongside fan mail from kids practicing on cardboard keyboards. Through it all, Marcus kept 2 rituals: Thursday lessons at the community center and weekend breakfasts with Elena. No matter how jet-lagged, he never missed either. The classical music industry loves prodigies but rarely knows what to do with grown ones. A Juilliard study found 68% of competition winners experience career declines by age 30, victims of their own early hype. Marcus avoided the trap by diversifying. He recorded avant-garde jazz with David, co-composed film scores with Jennifer, sat on panels advocating for arts funding. Each project kept 1 foot outside the establishment that had reluctantly embraced him. Petrov called this strategy artistic hedging. The old director had transitioned from mentor to sometime collaborator, their relationship now peppered with arguments about commercialism versus purity. They once spent an entire transatlantic flight debating whether Marcus should perform at a tech CEO's birthday gala. The disagreement ended with Marcus taking the gig, then donating the fee to Mr. Rodriguez's outreach program. The trappings of success never quite fit. Marcus's apartment accumulated Grammy statuettes next to takeout menus. His tuxedo hung beside thrift store sweaters. When a luxury watch brand offered him an endorsement deal, he counter-proposed featuring his old Yamaha keyboard in the campaign. They declined. The community center kids thought this was hysterically funny. Elena watched her son's career with cautious pride. She kept her janitorial union card current long after his earnings could support them both. "Every floor looks the same when you're mopping it," she said during one backstage visit. The comment wasn't about cleaning. Marcus understood. Fame had ceilings and corners that needed just as much maintenance as hospital corridors. The industry called him accessible, as if it were a compliment. Critics praised his unpretentious brilliance, unaware how much calculation went into maintaining that image. When a major label wanted to rebrand him as a rags to riches story, Marcus insisted they include footage of him teaching Luis how to tune a broken upright. The marketing team complained about production values. The clip went viral anyway. Mentorship became his anchor. Working with Aisha, Jamal, and others kept his own playing fresh. Their struggles reminded him why certain techniques mattered. Their breakthroughs pushed him to rediscover fundamentals. Studies show teaching improves a musician's technical precision by 19%. But Marcus valued something harder to quantify, the way Luis's off-key questions often revealed new approaches to familiar pieces. Petrov grew softer with age. He started allocating conservatory funds to outreach initiatives without being asked. When a trustee questioned the expense, the director reportedly slapped Marcus's first audition tape on the table. "Find me another one of these in your prep schools," he'd said. The funding stayed. New generations of students arrived at the community center clutching YouTube clips of Marcus's performances. They expected a hardened virtuoso and found instead a patient teacher who still referred to Mr. Rodriguez for fingering advice. The kids didn't need to know their rickety piano was just like the one he'd learned on. They just needed to see someone who'd made it out without leaving himself behind. At 32, Marcus inaugurated the arts wing that bore his name. The ceremony featured Aisha, now a scholarship student herself, performing Rachmaninoff with the same off-kilter passion she'd shown at 12. Jamal accompanied her on violin, his technique rougher but more emotionally honest than the conservatory-trained players. Afterward, Petrov whispered, "You polluted my institution with sincerity." His eyes shone as he said it. The cycles continued. Luis took over Marcus's old teaching slot. Elena volunteered as the community center's bookkeeper. The original Yamaha keyboard was enshrined in the lobby beneath a plaque that read, "Play Me." Visitors assumed this was metaphorical until students arrived for lessons and actually did. Marcus still practiced daily. His hands moved differently, now, less frantic hunger, more settled authority. He'd learned what all enduring artists eventually grasp, that credibility compounds when shared. The morning of his 40th birthday found him at the community center piano, working through scales alongside a gap-toothed girl whose sneakers didn't reach the pedals. He adjusted the bench height for her, remembering another mentor's hands doing the same decades before. Somewhere beyond the multi-purpose room's thin walls, traffic honked and sirens wailed. The same sounds that had underscored his first stumbling attempts at music. The girl hit a wrong note and giggled. Marcus didn't correct her. He played the same error back, then twisted it into a jazz riff that made her eyes widen. The lesson continued like that. Imperfect notes, spiraling, into something no conservatory could teach. The piano's missing D-sharp still hadn't been repaired. The Yamaha still sat in the community center's multi-purpose room, its missing keys now polished smooth by young fingers. Kids no longer whispered about Marcus's audition. They studied the footage like an instruction manual. Every Wednesday, a new face appeared, clutching sheet music full of ambitious mistakes. Petrov's reforms outlasted his tenure. The conservatory reserved spots for students like Jamal, whose audition tape featured a piano missing twice as many keys as Marcus's had. Elena volunteered as an advisor, her hospital ID swapped for a visitor's badge. The best music doesn't come from perfect instruments. It comes from hands that know how to fill the silences between broken keys. Marcus proved talent isn't found. It's forged where opportunity and hunger collide. His story didn't end with scholarships or concert halls. It continued in every kid who heard an impossible melody and thought, maybe me too. That's how systems change. One note at a time.